Good afternoon. I'm Manoj Datta from IIT Delhi. I have a few observations, both on the ranking and the accreditation. So I'll start it, sir, in an inverted way. I'll start with the rankings. And I'll start with two examples. The IIT Delhi ranking, as per the QS ranking system, is 179. As per the Times, higher education is between 400 and 500. And as far as the Shanghai ranking is not in the top 500. So 3 ranking systems, global standards, 3 ranks. So the question is, for whom are we ranking and for what purpose? I'd like to give the other example. An underprivileged child in Chandigarh, son of a domestic servant, gets an AIEEE rank of 1 lakh. If 12 lakh students appear for AIEEE, he is in the top 10 percentile. But because of shortage of government institutions, he does not get admission in the 4 or 5 government institutions close to his place of residence. He comes to Professor Manoj Datta for advice, and he says, "Sir, can you tell me within 25 kilometers from Chandigarh, which is the best ranked non-government institution where I can go and study and get a great job?" At that time, Professor Manoj Datta was director of Punjab Engineering College at Chandigarh. And I said, "I'll surely help you." And I started looking for ranks of institutions within 25 kilometers of Chandigarh, where he could get any, with the 1 lakh, he could get any discipline of his choice. But I could not get a system which could help him or me to decide that which is the institution where he can go and take up computer science and engineering or something, and he would get at least a good assured job. So ranking is important. For whom is it targeted? If we are targeting it for the government, the national aspirations, then we look at global rankings. But if we are targeting a ranking for an underprivileged child in a small town who cannot move out from his institutions. And believe me, within 25 kilometers of Chandigarh, there were 60 institutions in the private domain. In Punjab and Haryana, depending on whether you took the road towards Ropar or whether you took the road towards Patiala or whether you took the road towards Haryana. From the 60 institutions, I still could not get a rank. And I still could not get a placement record, which was authenticated by either the NBA or the NAC or by any of the ranking institutions. So it all depends on whom you are ranking for. That's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is those of us who are involved with decision-making systems know that aggregation is a great spoil sport. Let me say that I want to develop a ranking system as is being done by the government of India. The first question is, how many key parameters? Now, if you have 5 parameters and if you have 25 parameters, you've got to understand that when you aggregate 25 parameters, it's going to submerge some of the parameters. All of us we do environmental ranking in civil engineering, and we are always at the crossroads of how many criteria. More criteria look better, but when you add them up and divide them and sort of give them some kind of weightages, many criteria become submerged. Now, what happens is that by giving weightages, we are deciding what is important. But who are we? We are not the stakeholder. It is for the stakeholder to decide what is important to him. So from my perspective, ranking is important. But single ranking systems are not important. If it is to be, if there has to be a global ranking system, fine. If there has to be a national ranking system, fine. If there's to be state ranking system, fine. And if it's got to be a regional ranking system, fine. If there's going to be a global ranking system on research, it's fine. But don't confuse research with a global ranking system on entrepreneurship, and don't confuse research with a global ranking system for producing undergraduates for great jobs. So there should be n number of ranking systems. And to the user, he should be able to go into the ranking system and make his decision. When I aggregate research when I aggregate jobs, when I aggregate entrepreneurship, when I aggregate patents, when I aggregate teaching learning, when I aggregate continuous improvement, I aggregate and I aggregate and I divide by 15 and I submerge most of the things. So maybe I get a great global ranking system, but then who's going to use it other than the government or the few boys who want to go abroad in Ivy League colleges? So I think there should be N ranking systems. What is N? I don't have an answer. But a ranking system must be available to a student in Madhya Pradesh within 30 kilometers or 50 kilometers of where he stays. If he can't pay to stay in a hostel, which are the best institutions? That choice must emerge in front of him, and it must be totally transparent. That means every data point used in the ranking system first must appear so that he can go back and check on it. Do I have another point to make about ranking, sir? I think I've noted something, but I can't. Yeah, so I only want to demonstrate that the key criteria in most of the international global ranking systems is the globalization of your campus. That means how many international students and how many international faculty you have. It just doesn't work for India, where the internal pressure to first meet the demands of the aspirations of the Indian students is so high that even if you open the IITs or the NITs to all global students, they cannot crack the JEE or the IEEE. So we all consistently lose on that factor. And in government institutions, as Professor Surendra Prasad will know, getting international faculty on controlled salaries with all kinds of constraints, we are not yet open for global faculty. So where is the globalization of faculty? I think the private institutions are ideally poised to have great global students and to have great global faculty, but they cannot be in a controlled mode about the kind of fees that they charge. So the larger message which comes across is you need to go into from a controlled educational environment to a more free educational environment with a little bit of control to a segment of the population in the private institutions where fees may be controlled. But I see no reason why a great institution in India cannot hire a great faculty at great salaries, even if they have to charge the same fees as a great American institution does in dollars. So unless that openness comes, we are going to continue to suffer on globalization. And the real challenge is, how will globalization occur in the IITs? It won't occur from the undergraduate level, but there's great potential for getting good quality students at the research level. We always talk amongst ourselves that people reaching the PhD levels are basically BTech students going to MTech, and then MTech's not getting a great job coming to PhD. But the fact is, are we able to attract the global students to our PhD program? And I think we need to crack it from that angle. The globalization of IITs will occur with global researchers and global students, if we can do that. I'd like to speak about accreditation briefly. Accreditation is benchmarking, and pardon me, being an engineer, I like to think in numbers, and if I have a 0 to 100 scale, well, you're going to pass class 12, you better get 33. I don't know what's the rule nowadays, 40? 30, 40 out of 100 in a subject?
40,
50, oh absolutely, wonderful. We are raising the benchmark. So there has to be a pass-fail benchmark, and that benchmark can move up and down depending on how good you want your pass to be. Or how you can move it down on how inclusive you want your pass to be, or you have a standard. So accreditation is the benchmark, and ranking is the marks that you got out of 100. You're a topper if you got 99.999 and maybe 100 out of 100. So I look at them in a continuum. And there is always this issue about what the benchmark should be. Do you want to be more inclusive? Can I have thousands of institutions not accredited? That means I raise my benchmark to 60. I want to be inclusive. I bring my benchmark to 40 and say we will go towards 60 so that in a few years we'll take everybody. That's continuous improvement as one sees it from a national perspective. So in the process, while other speakers are speaking, I also got a little educated. So firstly, do our national accreditation systems have a pass-fail or a graded system, right? So there's a grading system in NAAC. So are they headed? If you have n grades, you become a ranking system. Suppose you have 100 grades, one for each mark, and you become a ranking system. But I believe a grading system which is very broad is putting you in categories because it recognizes two things. You can't rank in a very fine-tuned manner. But if accreditation is benchmarking, then grading is kind of in between ranking and accreditation. The point that I'm trying to make is we would like all institutions to be fully accredited. And those who cannot become fully accredited, we would like them to be provisionally accredited, wanting to become fully accredited. Those who have not reached the criteria for provisionally accredited may fall in two categories. One, yet to be accredited, means they are not feeling confident enough to take the exam, or went for accreditation and not accredited. So basically there are four categories. Fully accredited, provisionally for a few years till you become fully accredited, you did not come for yet to be accredited, and not accredited. So this kind of a system does exist in the NBA, partly sir, but it is further confused by calling institutions tier 1 and tier 2, which I have been dead against, because all institutions are great. Tier 2 institutions can be great as well. They can be fully accredited and they have no reason that a tier 2 should be attached to it. But now it appears that now there is an international accreditation, a national accreditation. So should it be? There should be state-wise accreditation. That is important. And why is that important? If we lower the benchmark...
I'll request you to...
Yes, I'm just finishing off. If we lower the benchmark too much, then somebody else who wants to be recognized as a greatly accredited institutions will go to Abbott or go to an international accrediting institution and place himself higher. So we have to find the balance where by diluting too much and getting all our institutions in, we don't drive the top colleges to go in for international accreditation as well. But that's a choice they have to make. Finally, most institutions who apply for accreditation are great in infrastructure and are great in academic systems because they copy the best academic systems. The key indicator for accreditation is the faculty quality. And that is the one which is interlinked with how many students go to do research, get a PhD from good institution, and come back to teaching. When we close that loop, then we will also close the loop of the quality of faculty. Thank you.